is a Friday the 13th in 2021, which is why our producer apparently got lost on the way here. But here are Kathleen and I to talk about what makes music breathe. I am Deborah Henson-Conant. I'm a composer and a performer, and Kathleen Wiley is a Jungian psychoanalyst. We both play the harp, and so we call this Jung at Harp. And Kathleen, you are doing a whole workshop this summer, and I think from now on about spiritual embodiment. You can explain it, and breathing is a huge part of that. And so, why don't you just kind of start off the conversation and tell us why you've been thinking about what makes music breathe?
Yeah, I'd love to. So two things is often when my husband and I are in the car, well, maybe not often, but every now and again when we're in the car together, listening to music, we'll hear a song and he'll say, "That song breathes." And I'm always curious exactly what it is he's feeling, hearing, experiencing. And of course, he and I have conversation about this. So I've played with in my own harp playing what makes music breathe. And I've played around with it with voice some because it kind of seems easier, the phrasing when you sing. But anyway, so there's that side of it. But there's also the side that in my essential embodiment practices, online sacred circle, the third practice we're working with is rhythmic breathing. So all week long, I have been studying and contemplating and practicing playing with rhythmic breathing. And so I'm curious about how number one, the rhythm, the fluctuation between poles that we've been talking about, and the tuning into our own organic fluctuation between poles of inhale and exhale, what all that means for how we play music, for how we move through our day, how we deal with our own emotions, how we manage and respond to our own needs, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I love one of the things that you said right there. I just grabbed onto, which was this idea of when we're playing music, how sometimes utilizing our breath as we're playing music can allow the music to breathe. So let's break it down. And what does it mean? What makes music breathe, or what is music that's breathing? And I think that often has a lot to do with phrasing. When we breathe in and when we breathe out, just like, in the ocean, breathing back and how it breathes with the waves, it's not like go out, come back, go back, go back. And we talked about this a little bit last week when we're talking about a pendulum. There's even more so in breath and more so in the ocean. There's like a, and the turnaround, there's this beautiful, just this beautiful arc. And so every phrase also has an arc that is the arc, which is like the arc of breath. And I think that's why we love the sense of arc, because breath is the first activity that we engage in on our own. I mean, we come out, I'm sure there's other things we're doing. I'm sure I was, playing on it. I don't know what I was doing in the womb, but I was listening. Well, wait a second. I was listening in the womb. I was listening. But my first act of personal expression with my voice was when I breathe. It's not like I wasn't alive before then, because I remember, hearing things. So I think, but it's my first act that allows others to hear me. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to talk about, I'm interested to talk about that. Like, when you're in the womb, can you make noise? I don't know. What if you could? What would happen? Could you keep your mother awake? That's a whole other thing. Can you hum in there? I don't know. But would you even stop it? Okay. Just sorry, I had too much coffee, and I didn't even have that much. Back to this thing of breathing. I remember. So I came from a classical standpoint. I didn't. I came from hearing singers. I've heard singers all my life. And my mother and my aunt were both opera singers. And so I was constantly hearing that whether it was like in opera, there's an aria where it's like a song, but there's also recitative where I'm speaking and I'm acting as if I'm speaking, but in fact I'm really singing. But wait, am I speaking or am I singing? So I heard these things all the time, and the difference between the use of language in the recitative and then the aria. How there's a difference in music, and in the aria, there's this breath. I mean, there's a different use of breath in those two things, and this I think is so beautiful because there's just like in. I'm sorry. Just like in there's two basic underlying rhythms in music. There's the walking rhythm and the skipping rhythm. Okay. And I think there's two basic kinds of using breath in music. One is the speaking breath, and the other is this legato breath, which allows you to just kind of stretch to points and still be on them. I noticed you're looking. Do we have some?
Yeah, we've got some comments.
Great,
from Connie,
beautiful.
and I'm kind of glancing at them and listening to you because you're saying a couple of things that I think are important for the beginning of our conversation. And the first comment is Connie says, my issue is what part of the music will make me remember to breathe? And so what I want to say is it isn't the music that's written or even that you're hearing in your head, but it is the music of your own body mind in resonance with whatever you're playing. So being tuned into the literal rhythm of your own breathing, I think, is the key to being able to bring that, what you were talking, DHC, I thought about, is that swell. That the breath, we begin and empty, and then there's a filling up and this point of the highest swell, the arc, and then this release and coming back in. And that when we can begin to tune into that in our own nature, first by our literal physical breath, then by our own natural rhythm that extends to what we know about our emotional body and our mental body and our spiritual body, which we can break those down. But I think what I want to say to me is key in what you're saying also about that, the stretching, is that it's being in tune to one's own breath and to the capacity to affect the breath through consciousness, through like the aria that wants that breath to just last longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer and longer, or the need for the breath to be more short and staccato.
Well, you're also, two things. First of all, the words. I mean, for me, the words are the music. All the music comes out of the words. All the music comes out of the words. The music is in the words. The words give the music, and that's not always true. But you can write music without words. But for me, the music is in the words, and the words just give the music its shape. And the music and the word and the emotion behind the words gives the swell. And you said that when you said the word swell, I'm just thinking of all the times in a play or where I will write, and the music swells. The music swells when there's a well of emotion. But going back to Connie's question, and I think this is really beautiful because there's sort of two meanings here. We're talking about the breath of the music itself, but there's also breathing while you're playing. And I remember my friend Natalie Cox, she was, when I was first learning the harp in my early 20s, she was the person who was a year ahead of me, and she was this amazing person. And I remember looking on her sheet music, and she would write breathe. She would literally write it on her sheet music. And so Connie, I think this is really beautiful, what you're asking. I think a lot of times when I'm struggling with something, whether it's, am I going to breathe, or when do I relax or or am I going off in this thought pattern that is really not helpful for me? And I can often use triggers that the same trigger that normally would send me into anxiety or holding my breath. If I can start to identify it, then I can actually use it as a trigger to breathe or to relax. And if I can't do that, if I'm not, if I can't distinguish, if things are still really vague, then I can often look for some random thing to help me practice. So right now, I run every day, and I'm trying to learn to practice my singing breathing, which is the opposite of what I usually do. My singing breathing means when I breathe in, my stomach goes out, and when I breathe out, I engage all the muscles of my stomach to help me breathe. And it's just different for me. And so I'm literally practicing it as I run, because I have to. It's like breathing practice. And I don't know if that is helpful, and if that's what you're actually asking, Connie. But let me know. And also, Connie made another really, a really important point here, that babies fart in the womb. So that I absolutely do not want to go over. That is a whole different kind of breath there.
Well, and I want to say to Connie's comment about some more confidence and understanding of the music makes us feel and breathe to the music. Yes. And the reason is, when we're confident and we have an understanding, then we're more relaxed, which means our breathing is more usually deeper and slower and more rhythmic and reciprocal. Because when we get anxious, we get scared, we get angry, then our breath automatically becomes more shallow and quicker, which then physiologically in the body creates more adrenaline, which we will either experience as anxiety and fear or excitement, which are really the same thing physiologically. It's just the emotion that comes along with it. So that's the real point here, is that our emotions automatically affect how we breathe.
Right.
That automatically affects how we breathe. So this is why, again, when you play a song and you said the words, DHC, the words give the story, which express the emotion. So there's the emotion that then automatically changes the breathing. So when you're singing the song, then as you're singing the words and the emotion is evoked, then it automatically expands or becomes shorter and choppier, whichever the emotion is that's being expressed. And the more conscious we can be of what our breathing is doing, then the more we can engage with it consciously, like you're doing with your running. It's an interesting practice, actually, to tie it into that setting.
Oh, really interesting. And I want to come back to just something that you just said. You said that we automatically will, and I think we automatically do if there's nothing in the way of that. If we've got, like, if a singer is thinking about technique, how my technique is, but that's going to get in the way. If a singer is worried about, how do I sound, blah, 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 that's going to get in the way. But when we are completely allowing ourselves to sing the meaning of the words for us, and one of the things I noticed is that they don't even have to be words. And this is something that I've noticed somebody in the academy said to me recently, or noticed, is that when they're improvising, like, if I'm just improvising, I'm just kind of dancing with my fingers, which is fun, but I can also sing along with it. And when I do, I get a different type of improvising, like, I'm just going to get something different. And now I just happen to be singing exactly what I'm playing. It kind of doesn't matter. I mean, that's, but if I, bleh. But if I start, I like if I were to leap around the harp, I probably couldn't follow. I couldn't follow my voice.
Mhm.
But in this case, my hands and my voice are following each other. And I'm just making shapes, but they're shapes that have voice versus shapes that just have physical movement. And there's
Yes.
something different there. And I'm hearing, I don't know if, are people hearing background noise? Like I've got my air conditioning on and I can turn it off and it seems to, I'm hearing sort of a whoosh that comes in and out. Is that
I don't, my computer fan is running, so I don't know if
okay?
that's what's
All
being
right.
picked up or not. Yeah.
Okay, well, there we will just imagine that that's some kind of breath in the background there. That's and hopefully not a scary breath.
Right. So there are two things I want to pick up on what you've said. And one is the most, I don't want us to forget to say the most fundamental thing, which is that the breath throughout all cultures is connected to the life force that gives us life, the life force that enlivens us. To the Eastern tradition refers to prana. It's the essence that actually gives us life. And we know physically, if we literally stop breathing, we stop living. So there's something about breath that connects us to the life force and the flow of life. And that takes me to the second thing, which is I think a beautiful and important point you were making, which is that we will, if we are actually experiencing the emotion, then we will automatically go there in the expression of it. But if something thwarts or interferes or blocks our total experiencing of the emotion, then it doesn't get expressed. And things like critical self talk, focus on technique, worrying about getting it right or wrong, all of those things, as well as muscular patterns of tension we aren't even aware of, and as well as any anxieties that may be activated in our kind of subconscious, unconscious around what we're getting ready to do. All of those things will produce muscular tension that blocks the experiencing of the emotion and blocks the full use of the breath, which then is also going to affect our music or our singing or our living.
Well, I'm obsessing about when you said when we stop breathing, we stop living, because I know that people on iron lungs, they're not breathing, but they're still living. So I want to go. Okay,
Right.
apparently these are off for the day. So I want to go back to that because it it makes me realize when I thought about that, and I realized, okay, so the rhythm of breathing, even if I can't do it for myself, even if there's a machine that's doing it for me, that the rhythm of breathing is a metaphor as well, whether it's a literal thing or not. And that metaphor of breath, which I'm also thinking is wow, it's an engagement with air, which is
Mhm.
made me think of flying. Flying is another engagement with air, in
Mhm.
which, not like I've personally done this, but in which we take it in
Mhm.
and then we use it, and then
Mhm.
we let it out. And God, it's that moment when we're letting in. And you talked about this just before we spoke. You talked about the letting in and the letting go. That the
Mhm.
breathing is that engagement.
Right. That's right. That's right. And that there has to be both. Thus, the rhythmic breathing is important. And this again brings us back to the rhythm in music, and then each phrase having a breath, and then the entire tune having a breath, so that there has to be that rhythm, that equal outgoing and coming back in. And we can then consciously work with our breath for different effects. I have a friend who has gotten into doing holotropic breath work. And for any of you who have done holotropic breath work or other kinds of work, you actually do short, shallow breaths at certain times to induce an altered state of consciousness. So, yeah, the breath,
What is holotropic breath work? What does
it's a
holotropic mean?
yeah, it's a holistic way. It's holotropic, hologram, that there are multiple layers of reality going on simultaneously, and that the breath gives us an ability to move from one state of consciousness or energetic state into another.
Hmm.
And there's a lot that could be said about holotropic breath work, but the main thing for us to know is it's using the breath to induce different states of consciousness. And as a healing modality, the idea is if you can induce a different state of consciousness, then you can come back to the state of consciousness you live every day with a different template to change your experience. So
That's really interesting because it
yeah.
reminds me of sort of my earliest definition of art. Art allows us to art lifts us from the burden of consciousness for a moment and drops us lightly back and slightly changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
a way, it almost sounds like you're talking about the art of breathing. That I don't know. I mean, there's an artistic experience.
I think that's a beautiful connection because, we breathe automatically. And to your point about the iron lung, yes, if someone's on an iron lung, they're still breathing, but they are still getting the breath. They're still getting that essence taken in. So we have to take in that essence that's associated with the breath in order to keep living, whether we're doing it with our own body or we're hooked up to a machine that's doing it for us per se. There has to be that connection to essence.
Oh, interesting. Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
as we speak, I'm realizing there's so many different, there's a spectrum of the meaning of breath. There's
Yes.
breath as there's breath as a pulse, a pulsating rhythm of
Mm-hmm.
our lives. There's breath as the arc of a phrase. There's
Mm-hmm.
breath as the integration with what's around us and the pulse of bringing it in and letting it go. And it sounds like there's breath in which we can actually alter our consciousness or relieve ourselves of one consciousness so we can come back into this one with an openness that we didn't have before. And it sounds like this is part of what you're doing in your class. Is there anything you could share with us in a little tiny bit that you're willing to about, what you're teaching?
Yeah. So I'll just give you a really quick synopsis. The rhythmic breath practice is very simple on the surface, but it's as with the practices you talk about in the Strings of Passion, it's the daily discipline of coming to it and doing it. But you basically set aside 2 time periods a day of up to 10 minutes, and you start by getting yourself into a relaxed state. So the first practice in essential embodiment practices is body awareness, because we have to be aware where we're tense and where we're not. The second is the practice of relaxation, learning how to use visualization to actually release muscular tension. Then you begin to work with your breath and you breathe in. I usually suggest to 4 heartbeats and breathe out to 4 heartbeats. Maybe you do it to 2 heartbeats, or maybe you set a metronome and you want to breathe at the rhythm of inhale, click, exhale, click. And so a metronome can be helpful, but the idea is you establish an equal inhale and exhale. And there's a tremendous value in establishing that to a certain number of your own heartbeats, because then it begins to bring you into rhythm with your own natural body functioning, your own rhythm. We talked last week about moving to the drum, your own inner drummer. The heart is the drummer in the body. And so practicing that and doing that and then tracking what you experience. Then what you do with each of those 10-minute periods is it's like you're going to the gym and building a muscle. So here you are and you're caught in traffic and you're running late and you start to feel anxious. You realize you're breathing shallow. And so you go into your rhythmic breathing. Or you're having an interaction with someone you care about and all of a sudden you feel hurt and you want to get angry and lash out and you find everything inside of you revving up. And because you've got the muscle, you automatically go into your rhythmic breathing. And it changes the physiology in your body, thus changing what you're experiencing emotionally, thus changing your capacity to think. Because lots of times we really aren't thinking. We're having thoughts, but they're automatic patterns that are kicking in. We're not really thinking in the sense of looking at the big picture, putting the puzzle pieces together, seeing possibilities.
I want to ask two questions, and I also want to say I love this because you're answering Connie's earlier question, which was, and I'll see if I can pull it back up again. I think it's this one. Which
Yeah.
part of the music will make me remember to breathe? And it sounds like in a beautiful world, in fact, we are using the thing that takes us out of ourselves to help bring us back into ourselves as a trigger to come back into
Yes.
ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
So that I love that. And then the other thing I wanted to ask was, okay, how do you track this? You said, and then you track it. And I was like, wait a minute, how? I mean, like, what am I tracking?
Yeah, so I like to use what I learned in Angeles Arian's foundation training with her, that to track something, I say to always identify the four rivers. So what as you did the practice was most challenging? What was most inspiring? What was the biggest surprise you experienced? And where did you experience a sense of love? Because if we can track challenge, surprise, love, and inspiration, then we are tuning into our felt experience. And we're being with all of these nuances of our own natural rhythm. Yeah, I love it. Inspirato.
I'll do that again. One moment, please.
So tracking it is a place where we use our self-reflection to acknowledge, name, and value our own felt experience. I'm going to say that again.
Pardon me.
That's okay. It's where we use our capacity for self-reflection to acknowledge, name, and thus validate our own felt experience.
Okay, can you say that again? Because
yeah, yeah, that when we track our experience, we are using our intellect and our thinking, our capacity for self-reflection to acknowledge, name, and value our own felt experience.
So we're making a connection between those two things.
Yeah. And I want to say this, and this is what I find for myself, and Connie, I resonate with that when I'm confident and understand the song I'm playing, that I'm more able to breathe with the music. When I'm confident and I trust that I know the tune, then I can just give myself over to it. And then I'm naturally expressing my felt experience of it, which is like the ocean with those waves that are moved by the wind. There we are, the wind, the air, the breath of God that moves over the waters to form life, the water being our emotions and our felt experience.
I'm also thinking when you say this, Kathleen, that when we are technically engaging with something and struggling with it, we're not at the point where we can speak ourselves through it, where it can speak for us. And one of the things that's been so powerful for me in my life with the harp, I was never drawn to the harp. I ended up playing the harp, and yet it's become a part of my voice, a part of my voice, my creative voice. And in order for it to be able, and in order for me to not just be struggling with it, I had to do two things. One was to simplify, easier said than done, always this word simplify, to simplify anything I was trying to play to the level that gave me, to my level of technical ability. So there was taking what I'm given and not just being like, oh, how do I do that? But wait a minute, what's the fundamental? What's the essence of this? Like if I was given, like here, play this chord, and I'm like, I can't. Or if somebody said, play these chords, and I can't do that fast. But if I can be given the fundamental, what is fundamental there? That is a progression of C and A and D and G. And if I know the fundamental that I can always put a third above that, then I can, even at a very, very simple level, I can use that to express myself without having it to be this huge. And yet we get so, it's like, wait, but no, that's it was there. I got to get it like that. And and that takes, I guess I would say almost like humility of like, no, this is what I can do. And this is beautiful. Can I see what is beautiful about this that is different than the beauty of that? It's not just more beautiful because it is more complex. So that's the first thing. I think of that as almost like a spiritual acceptance. And then you have to deal with your shame, blah, 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 blah. Well, not blah, blah. That's a huge thing. So there's simplifying it to where I literally am, not literally, where I am right now. Then there is the lifelong practice of how do I then coordinate and learn over and over and over to play this and see the beauty until I can speak with something that's more complex. And for me, I experience it as the harp is a prosthetic, meaning it is a part of my voice that I lost, or I was, maybe I was born without it, or don't have it for some reason, and it's separate from me. And so I'm going through the integration process of actually having this voice and reconnecting or connecting with, so I can speak with it. Sorry. And it's a process to be, and then there's the willingness to be able to share what I'm really saying right now, knowing that everything that's born is born slimy. It does not going to come out gorgeous at first. And we can either get scared by what it looks like, or we can embrace that. And boy, that's a challenge, a lifelong challenge.
Yeah, but I think what you're saying and what you're sharing is so important, that when we can value the one thing we can do, that simplest thing, then we can give ourselves over to the felt experience of it, which totally changes how it sounds. Even though our finger or fingers may be plucking the same strings, it totally changes what comes out, because our felt experience, it is like it flows through us into the heart, that prosthetic that you're talking about. And so I think all of us have to really watch how we judge ourselves and give up comparing, competing, and criticizing, and really begin to affirm and experience the power of what we can do. And it's the same thing in how we express our emotions to other people we're in relationship with. Or it's the same thing about how we deal with our own needs and that rhythm of needing to take in and wanting to give out. And if we can start with what we can do, then as you said, we build from there. It's like then things can begin to open up and expand, and then we have more inner resources as well as outer resources, technique for our instrument.
And I love that, because it brings us right back, brings us back to the subject, which is, what makes music breathe, and what's the music of breath, and I'm just realizing, and the breath is the first thing. It is the first art form we engage in. It is our first song. And so I love that you are teaching and that we are talking about engaging in that art form, practicing that art form of breathing, so that we can then be present when we're playing music to feel the breath of each song, because I'm also realizing that each song, each phrase of each song, it has its own breath. And when we are playing music, whether we're inventing it, improvising it, or playing something that's on the page, we are breathing with
Yes.
that piece of music. And when we actually are able to breathe with it, that's this beautiful act of love as well. Breathing with someone else is so, it feels like it connects to so many things. It connects to us as humans who are not alone. We cannot live or be alone, and we also cannot be alone without our environment. We are constantly taking it in and then allowing parts of ourselves into it. And so I just love that you are teaching this as part of your, what is it, that your course, which is this embodiment.
Right.
Embodiment.
Yeah, it's the essential embodiment practices, and it's the first circle within an ongoing series for Inner Divine Spirit online sacred circles. So if you're interested, you can go to Inner Divine Spirit and you'll find the link for the information. You
And then
know,
I
yeah.
just want to say, and then I love that you're teaching it just from the breath up, and I'm often teaching it into the breath, from the music into the breath, and I love talking about it, that connects it. What were you going to say?
Now, I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking about, there have been times when I've been playing the harp where, with a song that I do know well, and I'm thinking about the Far Away Waltz, which is one of those beautiful, melancholic Scotch Irish tunes that just, I know I was starved in the potato famine. I mean, they just speak to me. John will come in the room and say, "Can't you flip some levers and make that sound happy?" But I'm just so into it. But I've had the experience before of playing that and just being so in it with it that all of a sudden I was so struck by the beauty of what I was hearing, I stopped playing. Now, fortunately, I was in my living room by myself. But what you just said about, there was something you said about that playing and the breath, and that just made me think about the love that when we are in that rhythm of our own being, which the quickest and most obvious way to connect with that is the breath, then there is something we do get to of the beauty of our own nature, the beauty of the divine in us, that when we bring that presence to playing our music, that we get to the beauty inherent within the tune. And that is such a different expression than when we go to play it to get it technically right and show off and make sure we have this movement. And you've often talked about, when you played the Nightingale for the first time publicly, how struck you were, and that was the tune people commented on. And yet in your mind, it was the least impressive. But the difference was, and I see this happen to you when you go into that tune, you go into a felt sense of what you're sharing. And that just comes out of every pore and out of your fingers and out of the strings. And that's what we're talking about, is that the breath that is the connection to that essence of life. And that when we are consciously tuned in and we consciously cultivate and build that muscle of rhythmic breathing, then it allows us to move between different states of emotion, different states of consciousness, and different worlds of reality.
Wow. And and music becomes a platform for that.
Yes.
And music allows us to express that breath and that phrasing. And I just want to read what Connie said,
Yes.
because it was a beautiful comment, and I think it's a great way to bring us out. I think, Dwara, I think your inspiration when you play on your emotion gives the breath and life to your music. And it's true, when we can let that out. And the musician's empathy with their playing gives life for others to feel. I think whenever we see art, the simplest to the most complex, I think that's such a beautiful way of saying it. It gives life for others to feel. It's like sharing the experience of life. And whenever we share that, we open up more understanding and more experience for anyone we share that with. Not because it's not about being amazing. It's about sharing another part of being human.
And when we show up and with a presence that's unobstructed to the flow of essence through us and through our instrument, then it automatically invites other people to flow more freely around their blocks. And so, absolutely, that we bring life, which then it's like we become the tuning fork that the other tuning forks in the room come in
Right.
to simpatico with, which is not our essence, but the essence in them. Yeah.
This is a beautiful place to end this, and I want to say this is true of being a musician at any level. It's embracing being a musician, just like embracing being a dancer. That doesn't mean you're going to be a professional, but it is embracing the beauty of that. And so I would love to just give one suggestion to myself and everyone else, and I'd love to hear you give one. And mine is that when you are playing, me and everyone else in the next week, if you find to really start looking for the level of technical ability, and there can be beautiful sounds even within just 3 notes. You may find something very simple. What is the simplest way that you can find a sound you love? Do it over and over again. And simplicity means breaking it down to its essence. It also means not trying to do too many things. If you have a complex chord that you love, or a complex move, whatever it is, that is beautiful. And then can you find some way to move it maybe just a little bit, but not so much that it becomes too complex, so that you can start thinking, how can I express myself through this simplicity? Because that resourcefulness, how can I take this simple thing and express myself? Even, what are these 2 notes? What happens if I move them up 1 step and then I come back? Can I see the beauty in that? So that's what I would suggest. It's a kind of a breathing exercise, but it's with whatever it is you're doing, whatever instrument or whatever it is you're doing, going back to the simple and going back and forth between 2 simple things. That's what I'm going to recommend. And how about you?
And I'm going to recommend that you just set the timer for 1 or 2 minutes, and that you just start for that 1 or 2 minutes noticing your unbreathing pattern without trying to change it. So just for 1 minute in the morning or 1 minute before every meal, just turn on the stopwatch on your phone. All our phones have those now. And just tune in and notice your breathing. Because the first step is that awareness. And then the second thing is track what was challenging about even noticing for 1 minute. What was surprising about what you observed? Where did you feel inspired by the fact you did it? And where was there a sense of love? And I think you can also apply those 4 trackings to every practice session you have with your instrument.
Challenge, surprise, love, and inspiration. Beautiful.
Yeah, because it's a way of, again, tracking our felt experience, and that observing and naming and acknowledging and valuing begins to help the flow clear out the blocks.
And that, thank you so much, Kathleen, for exploring with me today this question of what makes music breathe, or what makes music breath. and
Yeah.
how we can look at both those things. Kathleen, thank you once again for a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Connie, for being here, and for the other people who were here for this conversation. Thank you for being part of it, both in the emails that you write, and I love getting them, and also in the comments that you make, and just by being here and being part of the conversation. And we will not be here next week, right? Because you're going to be away, but we will be back here 2 weeks from now. So thank you so much. And thank you, Kathleen. And I hope you will see me at hipharp.com, which is hip as in cool, harp as in the instrument. And Kathleen, you're at innerdivinespirit.com, right?
That's right.
innerdivineandspirit.com. Okay, thank you so much. And bye-bye.